All right, so I know what you're thinking. Why is he so damn close to the camera? Well, let me tell you, because today might be the most important lesson that we have all year. All year. All right, and that's why I wanted to get right up here, right up in your face, and tell you about the difference between a monarchy and a republic, because it's all about the power and where the power sits. Does the power sit with the people, or does the power sit with somebody way up top, acting like they know what they're doing all the time? That's what we're talking about today. We're going to start with a monarchy. All right. A monarchy is a system of government where all the power lays with one person at the very, very top. It's usually a king or a queen or an emperor or something like that. And it's a monarchy in part because the power is passed down within the family. The king dies, the prince becomes the king. That's how it goes. When the prince becomes the king, his kid's next in line. If he dies, it goes down the line. The power stays within the family. You can never really break into that. The only way that power changes hands in a monarchy, if it's not going from family member to family member, or if it's not going from family member to the next person they select when they die, the only way that power changes hands is with violence. Okay? The only way you become a king, if you don't start out as a royal family member, is if you take the king out and you roll up in there with all your swords and shields and take control. But also in a monarchy, the power lies with the king because everything that happens in that monarchy is made to enrich the king. It's to push all the wealth in society, all the power in society, all the way up to the top. All right? There's no power for the little people. There's no power for the peasants. If you're a farmer, you're a farmer. You're always gonna be a farmer. You're never getting up to anywhere. And if you're the king, you're up there until somebody comes and they try to take your head and they try to take the crown that's sitting on it. That isn't how it should be, though, right? And that's why we live in a type of republic. Because in a republic, the power lies with the people. The people choose the leader. The people work to enrich themselves. Not the leader, not a king. The people work for themselves. Because everything I do should make my life better. And I hope it makes other people's lives better, but the things I do should make my life better, not the king. And that's what a republic is all about. The power lies with the people. They pick the person in charge. And if they don't like the person in charge, they get rid of them. If the person in charge doesn't protect the people in a republic, he's out because he's not doing his job. But in a monarchy, the people enrich the king, the people protect the king. Sure, the king has to kind of look out for the people because if the king's not looking out for the people, they're not making him any money. They're not giving him any power. Right? If he's not looking out for the people to a certain extent, they can't protect him when someone else brings their army in. So yeah, the king has to look out for the people in a monarchy to a certain extent. But it's not like in a republic. All right? Where if you don't look out for the people, they're going to rise up and they're going to throw you out. And they don't have to do it with violence. They could do it by voting. They could do it with their power. So why do we have monarchies at all? Why do we ever have monarchies? Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. One, because there was always a small group of people that were at the top of things, and they just managed to maintain that for centuries and centuries and centuries. And sometimes the power would pass from one ruling family to another ruling family. But the people were just so used to it that they kind of just let it go. And when people started to get a little suspicious of it, when monarchies started to ebb and flow a little bit in their popularity, the kings and queens, the royal family, they just thought of this great idea. They said, well, you know what? I'm in charge. I'm in charge because God wants me to be in charge. I'm not in charge because you want me to be in charge. I'm in charge because I talked to God. And God said that I have the divine right to be the king. Not you, me. But here's the thing. How do we know? If God only talks to you, how do we know what God said? Well, we don't. But we're so afraid that we might go against what God says that all we have to do is fall for it for a little bit. Because once we believe that God is talking to you and telling you that you have a right to rule us, this divine right of kings, that power should lie with your family, that power is given by God, and that only God could take it away. And since God only talks to the king, he doesn't talk to you, you can't take that power away. How do you stop that? How do you change that? If you rise up, you pick up a sword, and you go after the king, you're going after God too. And you know, if somebody else does it, if somebody else comes in and they overthrow the king, And then they become king. And then they go, well, God told me to overthrow him because God told me I should be the king. Did God tell you you should be the king? No, God told me I should be the king. And that's how the divine right of kings works. That only the king, only the ruler is high enough or elevated enough that God speaks to them and says, you should be the one with all the power. Not him, not her, just you. We don't have that in a republic. I mean, you'll hear it every once in a while. I've heard Donald Trump say that God wants him to be president. And if that's so, there is no God. But the kings and the queens, that was always their go-to. You can't overthrow me. You can't take the power because God wants me to have this power. In a republic, we want someone to have power. The people decide who's in charge. Donald Trump is president of the United States because a lot of people voted for him. Now, maybe he didn't win the popular vote. That's another conversation. But the way that this government was set up was using something called the Electoral College to elect the president. And under those rules, people voted, people chose, representatives then voted and made Donald Trump president of the United States. So you could like it, you can hate it, whatever you want. We went through our process. And as long as we followed our process of what we think is fair in a republic, we've had our say. We've chosen our leader. And in November, if Donald Trump doesn't figure out this whole coronavirus thing and fix the stock market and the economy, maybe we vote him out because we still have the power. We might be locked in our houses. We might be going broke as the stock market crashes. You might not have your job that you had at the beginning of the year, but we still have the power to decide who our leader is. Whereas if we were in a monarchy, the plague. Remember Plague Day? All right, people still had to follow the king and the queen at the end of the plague. They can't say, oh, you didn't protect us from the plague. They still had to follow their leaders because they didn't have a choice. We, living in a republic, we have a choice. So again, for our purposes, the difference between a monarchy and a republic is that in a monarchy, the power lies way up top with the king. Kind of like the emperor and the Emperor's New Clothes, the story we read the other day. Kind of like Genghis Khan once he united the Mongol hordes. Kind of like Caesar Augustus once he declared Roman Empire and broke from the Republic. The power lies all the way up top with one person. When that person dies, they pass it on within their family. The only other way that power changes hands without them dying and going to a family member is some kind of act of violence where someone else comes in with an army and overthrows them. In a republic, the power lies with the people. We vote to decide who our leaders are. And if we don't like the job that our leaders are doing, we vote them out. In a monarchy, everything that is done by the people is to enrich the monarch, the king or the queen, and to make them wealthier and more powerful. In a republic, we work to enrich ourselves, to keep what little power we have, and to make ourselves better. In a monarchy, they devised this idea, the kings and queens came up with this idea called the divine right of kings. And what it said was that that king or queen was better than you and got to have that power because God chose them. Because God spoke to them and said, you and your family should rule this country, should rule this kingdom, should rule this empire. The divine right of kings. Power came from God to that person. There was nobody in between them. And when God is the one that's giving you power, that means your power is absolute. All right, we call this absolute monarchy or absolutism. The king or the monarch has all of the power. All right, they can make any ridiculous rule that they want. All right, sit there, think right now, most ridiculous law that you could think of. All right, in a republic, we're going to vote, we're going to overrule that. In a kingdom, if the king says this is the new rule, whatever rule you just thought of, go ahead, say it. Just say it out loud. Say that rule to the screen. Did you say it? Yeah, cool. That's a rule now because you're the king. You made that decision. All right. The people can do nothing to overthrow it because the king has absolute power. Now, the king has to do a lot of things to kind of retain that power and keep that power. He has to make other people just a little bit stronger than a normal person, and they have to be on his side, and he has to keep them happy to a certain degree. But he still has all the power. If the king says everybody has to walk around carrying a sheep all day, guess what? You're all carrying a sheep. If the king says everybody has to, eat in one place or eat one type of food or nobody can wear this color, guess what? That's what you're doing because the king has absolute power. Absolute. Not a little bit. Not more than most people. Absolute, all the power. All the power goes to the king. And we've talked about this before. We talked about this during Locke and Hobbes. We talked about this just the other day when I said to you, what do you think the phrase means? Absolute power corrupts absolutely. All right? Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. All right? And what it means is when you have all that power and there's no checks and balances, there's nothing stopping you from using that power, you're going to end up doing the wrong thing at some point. Because you don't have to stop and think about whether it's the right thing. Because it doesn't matter to you if it's the right thing. Because whatever you do is the right thing. Because you have all the power. We're going to be talking over the next couple of weeks, actually, probably, about the British monarchs. We're going to talk about the War of the Roses. We're going to talk about Henry VIII. We're going to read one of my favorite plays of all time, William Shakespeare's Macbeth. And we're going to continue to talk about how people with power and how they become corrupt. And the reason we're talking about republics and the reason we're talking about monarchies is because the minute we stop paying attention to the fact that we live in a republic, that's when it becomes a monarchy. Because once we give up our power as the people, there's always going to be somebody with their hand out to take it.